Hi everyone, welcome to the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. This is Daniel Cho, the Managing Director of Pathways to Wholeness Lifestyle Medicine, and I'm here at our North York Lifestyle Medicine Clinic in Toronto, Canada. I'm joined by Dr. George Cho, our Medical Director, and in this episode, we're going to continue talking about our series on obesity, excess weight, and weight loss. In our previous episode, we talked about weight cycling and yo-yo dieting and why that happens and why that's not so good for us. And in this episode, we're going to start talking about a lifestyle medicine approach to addressing obesity and excess weight. You know, lifestyle medicine is so amazing because it really emphasizes how you can take control of your own health and make lifestyle changes to prevent disease, also to manage disease in a way that works for you. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And in this episode, we're going to specifically focus on eating. What is the best diet that you can eat to manage your weight? So for starters, let's first talk about extreme diets. So Dr. Cho, can you share with us what are some of the most extreme diets that you've come across that are out there and that people are trying?
There's a whole array of diets, some more extreme than others. I remember when I was an intern at clinic, when I was a student, fourth year senior intern, and the very first patient I was assigned to was on a diet. She was on a weight loss program, and the diet was the HCG diet, something that we mentioned in the previous episode.
Right. Can you remind us?
Yeah, so HCG stands for human chorionic gonadotropin. This is a hormone that is important for pregnancy, but it also happens to suppress appetite. So scientists, they discovered this, and now they've put it into a weight loss program. And so pretty much you go on 500 calories per day for several weeks, I believe. And then you also take a few drops of HCG, and that's supposed to help suppress your appetite. And of course, the 500 calories per day is supposed to help you lose weight, which people do. But then, of course, like we talked about in the last episode, they'll often regain it back again. And this was this lady's story, that she was struggling with her weight on this program. There's other types of diets like the like juicing diets. You know, you go on carrot juice, or you go on cabbage juice or grape juice or something like that. You just drink juice.
Right. They call it juice fast sometimes.
Juice fasting,
right? Yeah.
Juice diet. Yeah, but clearly this is not very sustainable. Right. Some people go on what is called the blood type diet. That's quite common, as far as I'm aware. And this pretty much you're matching different types of food based on the type of blood you have. Right. And then there's the raw food diet, which is something that people can try, and they'll just eat raw food, which I think is not too bad, but it doesn't seem very sustainable. Right, I think most of us can probably use a little bit more raw food in our diet. But,
sure.
It doesn't seem very sustainable to go on a fully raw food diet, at least for most people.
Yeah, might not be palatable enough, I would guess.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Then of course there's other funny diets like the werewolf diet, where you match your food to like to the lunar cycle. And there's like cookie diet where you just eat cookies and things like that. So of course those are just funky diets that we really shouldn't get involved in. Yeah. But yeah, there's such a large array of diets that people can get into. A lot of them, but usually often there's a commonality. You restrict your calories very severely. You very limit the types of food, like very limit them a lot. Yeah. Things like that, which doesn't seem like a lifestyle to me. Which I think is why these things are so notorious for failure. Right. And it's unfortunate that people get sucked into these things. There was another patient that we had, and she had weight issues, and she kept this from her husband, but she was secretly using thousands of dollars secretly to try to do these different weight loss programs, all met with failure. So when you hear stories like that, it's really, really sad.
How did she hide it from her husband?
I don't know. I didn't ask.
Sure. But
that's her story. And when she came to clinic, she was clearly overweight. So and years of trying all these diets. She tried the HCG diet. She tried this diet and that diet, all with failure.
Right. Now, do you think that maybe the plethora of different approaches and diets is an indicator of how people are really struggling out there, and that people are really grasping at straws and try whatever they can? Maybe this just shows us how big of an issue this really is.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's something to that for sure. And people are capitalizing, the business people, they're capitalizing on this to make some money.
Like in our previous episode, we talked about these other programs where you have to buy packaged foods, or these programs where you have to keep going into the doctor's office or the clinic, the weight loss program office, and you're paying each time. So imagine every week. I'm not sure how much they pay, but it's probably not cheap. And so it's just expensive.
The expenses build up.
Right. Yeah. Right. So let's talk about a lifestyle medicine approach to obesity and excess weight. So tell us, what should we be eating that will help us, that will promote healthy weight?
Number one, we need to look at the major contributors to obesity and determine what those are, and then try to address those first. When we look at obesity and the global nature of it right now, the literally the epidemic scale with which it has grown, we know that this hasn't been always the case.
Right.
It's been the last maybe 3, 4, 5 decades.
Yes, around there.
Right, where obesity has really taken off.
Yeah.
Clearly, then it can't be our genes. I mean, the quote unquote fat gene or whatever gene, it doesn't just switch on in a generation.
Right.
That makes millions of people all of a sudden overweight.
And our genes don't change that fast.
No, exactly.
Right?
So that's, even though genetics does have a role to play, but clearly that's not the answer.
Right.
So then we have to ask ourselves, what has changed then in the past 5, 4, 3 decades? And one of those things is processed food.
Mm-hmm.
Energy dense, so lots of calories, yet nutritionally deficient food that comes in packages and that are very easy to overconsume. This is one of the things that's been added to our food supply globally, that has been added, and that correlates with the rise with obesity. Mm-hmm. And like I said, these foods are very high in calories, extremely tasty, so it's easy to overconsume.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, nutritionally deficient. And when we look at obesity today, we have to place our finger first on processed food. And so for our listeners, if we are serious about weight loss, we have to be extremely serious about severely, and I use that word purposely, severely limiting the amount of processed food that we consume. Yeah, let's look at some examples then. Let's take a granola bar.
Okay.
Your typical strawberry granola bar. Okay, it might have about 120 calories or so. That's equivalent to 20 strawberries, just raw strawberries. Now I want to ask you and just our listeners, just think about this. How many of those 120 calories in those granola bars, how many granola bars can you eat? Easily, you can eat 2, 3 in one sitting, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how many of us can eat 20 strawberries in one sitting? Many of us could, but we'd be pretty full afterwards. Right. See, this is the difference, right? 20 strawberries compared to 1 granola bars, completely different. Very hard to overeat on raw strawberries. Very easy to overeat on just the granola bar. Let's take orange juice as another example. 1 glass of orange juice has maybe 170 calories. That's equivalent to 2.5 oranges. Now, I don't know about our listeners, but I could easily consume 1, 2, maybe even 2.5 glasses of orange juice at one meal.
Right.
You know, but 2.5 oranges, I'd be pretty full after eating 2.5 oranges. Right. So, on the one hand, something that's very easy to consume, like orange juice, very nutritionally deficient. On the other hand, you got something that's going to satiate you, keep you full for a long time, and it's very hard to overeat, right? And you could just go down the line, donuts, right? Muffins, all these things are highly processed, very easy to overconsume, very, very high in calories. So whereas non-processed foods are typically, they keep you full and they make you full quicker, and they're lower in calories. So if we're serious about weight loss, Dan, we have to be very serious about processed food. Things that are coming in packages, in boxes, cans, and jars, in bottles, these types of things.
So in summary, it's really easy to get lots of calories very quickly eating processed food.
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
So we should be severely restricting processed food. So what should we be eating then to replace that? Because processed food is such a big part of the standard American diet, standard Canadian diet. We're in Canada.
Yeah.
So what should we be putting in to replace the processed food that we be taking out?
Yeah. The diet that I think science demonstrates to really promote a healthy weight is a whole foods, plant-based diet. So whole foods means non-processed, right? Or at least something that you process yourself, but not from the companies,
right? Yeah,
not from the factories.
Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, grains you cook it.
Yeah,
beans you cook it and eat it.
Yeah,
nuts.
Exactly. Yeah. You get them raw from the store and you go cook it yourself.
Okay.
Right. So that whole. That's what we mean by whole. Then plant-based, obviously foods that come from plants, right? They've done studies where they demonstrated this type of eating to promote weight loss. So, for instance, Dr. Turner McGrivey, I believe she's in Australia, and they did studies. She compared omnivores, semi-vegetarians, pesco-vegetarians, just vegetarians, lacto-ovo vegetarians, and then vegans, people who are fully plant-based. The ones who lost the least amount of weight was the omnivores, people who were eating anything, just no restrictions.
Okay.
The people who lost the most weight are the vegans, the fully plant-based people that are eating fully plant-based.
So what is it about plant-based eating that kind of promotes this sort of effective weight loss?
I think the key, Daniel, is fiber. Fiber is the non-digestible component of many plant foods, and fiber helps people stay satiated, which means to stay full. It also delays gastric emptying and intestinal absorption. So when people eat a lot of fiber, they usually stay full for longer. This means that they don't get hungry after 2 hours, right? It usually takes 4, 5, 6, 7 hours to get hungry, right? So it's hard to overeat on fiber. So I think fiber is one of the key components of plant-based foods that help people lose weight. Another component is that generally plant foods are actually lower in calories. Think about fruits, vegetables. It's amazing how little calories vegetables actually have, So vegetables are very low in calories. Same with fruit. So if we emphasize a lot of fruits and vegetables, these types of things, it's very low in calories, very difficult to overeat, and very hard to get extra calories if we eat them in the whole form.
So how much fiber do we need in a day?
Roughly speaking, it's about 30 to 40 grams per day is about optimal.
And what would you say are some of the best plant-based sources for fiber?
Well, most whole plant foods are a great source of fiber, but we're looking at whole grains and beans in particular. One slice of whole grain bread has about 5 grams of fiber. If you eat two slices of whole grain bread, you get about 10 grams, which is pretty much 1/3 of the way there of your full fiber needs. 1 cup of beans has about 10 to 15 grams of fiber, which is almost half, right? Just by eating that, right? Roughly speaking. But, if you have white bread, right, that has 0 fiber, you want to eat whole grains, beans, a lot of vegetables, and fruits have fiber as well. So most plant foods have a good amount of fiber. If we stick to those foods, usually you do not need to worry about your fiber intake.
So when you make some rice, you put in some beans, you make a tortilla, put in some beans, and you're pretty good.
Yeah, then you have a large salad on the side,
Right.
and you're good to go. For breakfast, you have, I don't know, you could say oatmeal, whole oatmeal, not the. I would suggest not eating the pre-made instant oatmeal,
Yeah.
but getting your oatmeal yourself and oats it and making it yourself. Then you add in some raisins and nuts, and then you have a good fruit bowl on the side. That should easily be 15 to 20 grams of fiber just there. So it's not hard to get your fiber when you're sticking with whole plant foods that are not processed. And that's key, because you can do really bad on a plant-based diet if it's all processed. Right? French fries are processed.
Sure.
Right? So whole plant foods is what we're really looking at here. By the way, for our listeners, animal foods has 0 fiber.
So let's talk about low carb. I know that there's right now a low carb trend that's going on. I think parallels with the gluten-free trend that's becoming very popular, and a lot of people, they talk about low carb for weight loss. So what are your thoughts on low carb? Because I think many plant-based foods have carbs, right? Or carbs are a very important part of plant-based eating.
Yeah, 2 things. Number 1, it is true that on a low carb diet that people lose weight more quickly than on a low fat diet. Low fat would typically be a vegetarian or a vegan diet. So it's true that when people go low carbohydrates, when they decrease the amount of carbohydrates, that they drop the weight faster. However, when scientists track these people over 1-2 years, the amount of weight loss, actually, there's no difference.
So long term?
Long term, no difference.
Okay.
So that brings to our second point. Low carb diets are usually high in meat.
Right, because you have to replace the carb with something.
Right, and that's going to be meat for most people.
Right.
And meat has 0 fiber, like I mentioned before. Right? And also we know, just from a chronic disease standpoint, that animal foods they promote inflammation in the body. They're linked with so many of our chronic diseases: heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer. So we can't just get so fixated on weight loss that we forget about everything else. Right? And so if a plant-based diet as compared to a high meat diet, if they ultimately in the long term can have similar effects, they why not go for the healthier option, right? Which is a whole plant-based food diet, right? So I do not generally recommend a low carbohydrate diet. I don't think it's really worth it. Now, when people experience some measure of benefit from a low carb diet, I think a big part of that is because people, when they go on low carb, they get rid of all the bad carbs, right? So if you think of a lot of people who be motivated to go on a low carb diet, people who might be overweight, right? People who might be sick. Why did they get sick in the first place? Why are they overweight? Could it be because, at least part of the reason could be because they're eating bad carbs. What I mean by bad carbs is white bread, white rice, refined pasta, muffins, all these types of bad carb, donuts. So obviously if you go low carb, that means you're going to cut off all these bad carbs. Who wouldn't feel benefit? Right? But is it really because you took off all the carbs, or is it because you took off all the bad carbs?
Right.
It doesn't mean that you should take off all the good carbs as well, right? There are good carbs. Generally speaking, there are some conditions obviously where you have to really limit your carbohydrates. But generally speaking, whole grains, brown rice, whole grain pasta, these things are good for you generally, and they're high in fiber, and these things I think are not unnecessarily, we don't have to necessarily take these out of the diet.
Great. So hey, let's talk about the number of meals. So I know that in the obesity space, there's conflicting recommendations. I know some experts, they suggest multiple meals throughout the day. And I think the rationale behind that is you want to keep eating so that you don't get really, really hungry and then be tempted to kind of like splurge. And then there's other experts who recommend more of a limited number of meals, like 2 meals. So what are your thoughts on this number of meals that's effective for a healthy weight?
Well, Dr. Koleova, she's a scientist who works, I believe, with Dr. Neil Barnard.
Yeah, at the Physicians Committee
Yeah.
for Responsible Medicine.
Dr. Kaliova, she and colleagues, they did a study where they compared exactly that. They put people on 6 meals per day. This was breakfast, lunch, and dinner with some snacks in between.
Okay,
so
yeah.
6 meals.
Yeah.
They compared that to people on 2 meals per day. All right, 2 meals per day. And they tracked these people over several weeks. And what they found was that the 2 meals per day group lost more weight and also had a greater loss in their waist circumference as well. So I don't think necessarily that more meals is necessarily better. It's very easy to overeat when you have more meals, to be honest.
Right.
If you're eating whole foods, plant-based, the fiber keeps you full, so you don't generally feel hungry as much. And so actually 2 meals, people do very well on the 2 meals. And whereas if you go 6 meals, I mean, it's so easy to overeat when you're eating 6 meals per day.
Right. And
So-
that's our experience at the clinic as well with our patients. They
That's
seem
right.
to be able to adopt to, at most, maybe 3 meals or a small third meal. It's not as hard, I would say, as people might initially think it is.
If you're going whole foods, plant-based. I mean, if you're eating refined stuff and low fiber, lots of meat, then you're going to feel hungry, right? But yes, we've had great success in the clinic. People always say, they thought that they were going to be hungry. They thought that they were going to lack energy, but they don't. It's actually the opposite, so it's worth giving it a try, I think, for most people.
And how about meal times? Do they matter in terms of a healthy weight?
It seems like it does. There's a study that they did where they compared large breakfast with large dinner group. So the large breakfast group, they ate half their calories, about 700 calories at breakfast time. The other group ate 700 calories at dinner time. And then they tracked these people. What they found was that the large breakfast group, they lost about 19 pounds. And then the large dinner group, they lost about 8 pounds over several months. Very interestingly, the amount of ghrelin, so ghrelin is the hunger hormone, is the hormone that makes you hungry, was lower in the breakfast group. And satiety, so fullness, the feeling of fullness, was higher in the breakfast group. On the other hand, it's very, very interesting. They found that the large dinner group, they were constantly hungry and they had very low satiety. They were not feeling full. It's very interesting. And you have to understand, these people, they were on the same amount of calories.
Okay, so it was isocaloric.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, which is very interesting, I think. And one of the reasons is because it seems like there's a circadian rhythm or circadian cycle to even the way your hunger hormones are released. And it seems like when you put food in your system early, between like 6 and 9 o'clock, that somehow that balances your hunger craving mechanisms and things in your body. So it seems like people are better able to regulate their hunger when they eat a large dinner as compared to when they eat a large breakfast as compared to a large dinner. And this kind of makes sense if you just think about it logically, right? You don't need a lot of energy at dinner time, right? You do need a lot of energy to fuel the rest of your day, so it's better to eat a large breakfast.
So this is kind of interesting because usually, I think for many families, the biggest meal is the dinner, the final meal. So we've kind of got it backwards.
Yeah, so we have so many things backwards in our society, and this is definitely one of them.
Yes.
A lot of people, they just their breakfast is coffee and donuts.
Rushing out,
Yeah.
just grab the coffee
exactly,
and donuts.
They eat that at 8.
Granola
no
bar.
wonder, yeah, exactly. They eat that at 8, and no wonder they get hungry by 11.
Right.
Whereas for people who are plant-based, we could eat at 7, a good plant-based high fiber meal. We're not hungry until 1 and 2. So with lots of water in between, you don't get hungry, right? But if we really skimp out on breakfast, then we're gonna get hungry at 11, and then we have to then eat lunch right after at like 1 o'clock, and then it disturbs our digestion, and then just it's a whole slew of problems happen from there on. Then we eat a large dinner, then we sleep on that dinner and it doesn't digest properly. Then when we wake up, we don't feel hungry, and it's just a bad cycle.
So if you're eating 2 meals a day, with maybe if you really have to, like maybe a smaller snack in the evening, like so what's sort of the spacing of the meals that you think would be most practical for most people?
It seems like our digestion does better when our meals are separated 5 to 6 hours apart.
Okay.
Yeah, so it seems like that's the amount of time that the digestive system needs to get the food from the stomach to the small intestine and to the large intestine, right? So that's the amount of time that you need. When you put something else in before that time, generally speaking, it seems to disturb digestion. So I would recommend people separating your meals by 5 to 6 hours apart. And for some people, they might be hearing that and be like, wow, that seems like a lot of time, right? But try eating whole foods, plant-based, high in fiber, and with a lot of water in between, a good amount of water in between. And I think most people will find that they actually do not get hungry. But it has to be whole foods, plant-based, high in fiber.
Great. So in summary, basically we're eating a whole foods, plant-based diet.
That's
so
right.
No animal foods. We're taking out the meat, the processed meat, dairy, egg, and focusing on the vegetables, the fruits, beans, whole grains, a little bit of nuts. So we're taking out the processed foods.
That's right.
And we're having a larger breakfast. Then there's a second meal. If needed, a smaller little thing at dinner time. And we try to eat around twice a day, and maybe space your meals, say 5-6 hours.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, so what would you say to people who say, well, can you really eat this way for the rest of our life? Because we're talking about a lifestyle approach. We're saying that, you could live a lifestyle that promotes healthy weight. But what if somebody says, well, seems like a short-term thing too and not sustainable?
Yes. Actually, before I answer that, Dan, we also want to emphasize that even within whole foods plant-based, we want to emphasize a lot of fruits and vegetables and maybe less carbs. Yeah. So when you eat whole foods plant-based, if you just eat tons and tons and tons of carbs,
right,
that's probably not the best either. So lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, I think would be a good thing to add as well. But going back to your question, so this is a healthy eating pattern. It's not really a diet.
In the sense of like a weight loss diet,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like a short term, I'm doing this just to lose weight, then I'll go back to my normal life in quotation marks. This could be your normal life, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Right.
Notice we didn't talk anything about restricting calories. Right, we didn't mention any of that. So it's just taking bad food out of our diets and just spacing out our meals a little bit more, emphasizing certain meals over other meals, particularly breakfast over dinner. Right. In fact, we didn't say that you can't eat dinner. We said if you are going to eat dinner, keep it very, very light. Right. So this is a totally doable diet. There's many people who eat this way and with great success. This is not a diet in the sense of a short-term kind of a gimmick, right?
Or fad.
Or fad, yeah. Now it is a diet in terms that it will help many people lose weight, right? But it is a lifestyle. It's a plant-based lifestyle way of eating that can be sustained for the rest of your life. Now, of course, in the early going, it might be challenging because we have to get used to it, but it can definitely be something that you stay in for the rest of your life. We'll be getting enough calories because, like again, we mentioned nothing about restricting calories, right?
And if you eat lots of fiber, lots of good plant sources of protein, you'll be satiated.
That's
right? And so calories tends to naturally go down.
That's right.
Right.
Yes. The calorie content in most plant foods are lower.
Yes.
Right. And you get fuller. So it's easier to appetite control on a whole foods plant-based diet. That's absolutely correct. Yes.
And, just going back to several episodes ago, we talked about the longest living people. And one of the features is that they eat the vast majority of their foods are from plant sources. They have very much a plant-based diet.
That's right. The Okinawans, the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, a lot of these people they eat mostly plant-based.
Right.
And the Seventh-day Adventists, many of them are eating fully plant-based. Many of them are eating only 2 meals per day. So these people, and they live very healthy into their 100s.
Right.
They're very sharp and vibrant. So this is definitely something that people can do. It may take some time in the early going, but it's something that you can definitely accomplish and keep for the rest of your life, and people will reap the health benefits. And Daniel, I would like to add that people won't be nutritionally deficient either, because most plant foods are very high in nutrients.
Right.
Whereas processed foods are very deficient.
Right.
So processed foods are horrible. You get low nutrients but high calories. Exactly what we do not want.
And lots of inflammation. Because of the
inflammation.
processed.
This is horrible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so we have to severely restrict processed food, limit or get rid of animal foods completely, stick with a whole foods plant-based diet, and with the 2 main meals, breakfast and lunch, light, very, 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 very light dinner, and nothing in between your meals.
And I would just like to add that, eating plant-based is becoming very popular right now. There's an explosion among especially young people, millennials. And there's so many cookbooks and resources that you can really use to make plant-based eating really, really enjoyable and palatable. It's not bland as some people might think it is. It's just amazing what you can do with plant-based foods. The flexibility, the versatility. It really is a lifestyle, a way of eating that you can truly do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, the YouTube channels are numerous.
Right.
And plant-based foods, it tastes amazing.
Right.
It tastes absolutely amazing when done right. And some people think it's really expensive. It's actually not.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest myths about
myth.
plant-based eating.
That's a tremendous myth. If we try to get everything organic, then maybe it is. But
we should do an episode on that.
Yeah, we should. It's a myth that's somehow super expensive. It's not. That's false. So it's totally doable.
In our next episode, we're going to talk about physical activity. And also, we're going to look at something called the Weight Control Registry, where they've been tracking people who've been very successful in long-term weight loss. And we're going to look at what are the things they did to achieve success. So we hope that you'll tune in for that. Please share this episode and this podcast with friends and family who you think could benefit from the simple yet powerful principles of lifestyle medicine. So you've been listening to the Lifestyle is Medicine podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.